Today I'll be reviewing The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Steven Covey. An important quote from Aristotle in this book is, "We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit." Our character basically is a composite of our habits. Sow a thought, reap an action. Sow an action, reap a habit. Sow a habit, reap a character. Sow a character, reap a destiny. The maxim goes. Habit 1. Be proactive. An important story from this is that one day, naked and alone in a small room, a man began to become aware of what he later called the last of the human freedoms. The freedom his Nazi captors could not take away. They could control his entire environment. They could do what they wanted to his body, but Viktor Frankl himself was a self-aware being who could look as an observer at his very involvement. His basic identity was intact. He could decide within himself how all of this was going to affect him. Between what happened to him or the stimulus and his response to it was his freedom or power to choose that response. The word responsibility. Responsibility. The ability to choose your response. Highly proactive people recognize that responsibility. Reactive people are often affected by their physical environment. If the weather is good, they feel good. If it isn't, it affects their attitude and their performance. Proactive people can carry their own weather. Whether it rains or shines makes no difference to them. They are value-driven, and if their value is to produce good quality work, it isn't a function of whether the weather is conducive to it or not. Eleanor Roosevelt observed, "No one can hurt you without your consent." People who end up with the good jobs are the proactive ones, who are solutions to problems, not problems themselves, who sees the initiative to do whatever is necessary consistent with correct principles to get the job done. Proactive language examples are, "Let's look at our alternatives," or "I can choose a different approach," or "I control my own feelings," or "I can create an effective presentation," or "I'll choose an appropriate response," "I choose," "I prefer," "I will." We don't have to go through the death camp experience of Frankl to recognize and develop our own proactivity. It's in the ordinary events of every day that we develop the proactive capacity to handle the extraordinary pressures of life. Habit 2. Begin with an end in mind. What lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us. Habit 1 says, "You are the programmer." Habit 2 then says, "Write the program. Until you accept the idea that you are responsible, that you are the programmer, you won't really invest in writing the program." One of the main things his research showed was that almost all of the world-class athletes and other peak performers are visualizers. They see it, they feel it, they experience it before they actually do it. They begin with an end in mind. I'll be fast-forwarding to habit 7, but to get a feel for the rest of the habits, please read the book. So habit 7 is sharpen the saw. The single most powerful investment we can ever make in life, investment in ourselves, in the only instrument we have with which to deal with life and to contribute. We are the instruments to our own performance, and to be effective, we need to recognize the importance of taking time regularly to sharpen the saw in all four ways are mental, physical, social, emotional, and spiritual. So for mental, it's reading, visualizing, planning, and writing. For physical, it's exercising, nutrition, and focusing on stress management. For social and emotional, it's service, empathy, synergy, and intrinsic security. And lastly, for spiritual, it's value clarification, commitment, and steady meditation. One last story is that there is this man who was cutting a tree with a tool, and the tool was a saw. So as he was cutting this tree, the saw had become very blunt, so it wasn't doing a good job in cutting the tree. And so another man come and realized this and said, "Why don't you sharpen the saw?" And then the man who was cutting the tree said, "I don't have time." And then the other man was like, "You have hundreds of time to cut this tree," because that's how long it was taking, because the end was so blunt, but he didn't have a couple of hours just to sharpen the saw. So that emphasizes the importance of sharpening the saw, and that could save so much time.